was my first professional movie. I was very entertained by the idea of being able to go into video stores and find it on the shelf.
It's funny because it's sort of, when you go to Blockbuster, you'll find it in the horror section.
To my great surprise, and to this day, inexplicably, it was listed in the comedy section.
I guess it's a thriller with a bit of a horror twist to it.
The story has the logic of a nightmare.
Well, it's a thriller.
To me, it's not really a horror film.
I'm not a big fan of horror movies.
It's definitely a psychological thriller.
First of all, it's a very strange and, horrible fairy tale.
Incredible action in this movie.
Drive, and hunt, and, and scare.
You could possibly put it into the action section.
It's a mindfuck.
I've never exactly felt comfortable with, quote, horror, with it being a horror movie.
And it's a weird movie. I mean, it's still a movie about a killer.
Certainly somewhere between that and thriller. So some sort of suspense, thriller, horror in there somewhere.
I don't think there's any moment where you wouldn't think that this could happen out there.
Now, if you've never seen this film, you can't look at this film and know what's going to happen.
The inspiration for The Hitcher was the Doors song Riders in the Storm, which is about a hitchhiking killer. And I always loved the song and thought that it was a great opening for a film. So I started with the screenplay of The Hitcher. I started with the opening 10, 12-odd page scene between Jim Halsey and John Ryder, and basically went from there. I got a copy of the California production manual, first of all, while I was living in Texas, and went down the list of all the producers, and I sent what's called a query letter. Basically, I sent a half-page description of the story, and I kind of dared people to read it. I got a 40% response, and I actually got to Ed Feldman by accident. I'd sent the letter actually to a producer named Phil Feldman, who produced The Wild Bunch, and I thought, well, it's probably a good idea to take a look at The Hitcher. And it got to Ed's company by accident.
My associate at the time, David Bombeck, thought there was a very good idea for a movie, and he said, could he develop it? And so we developed the movie over the phone. We never met Eric Red until we had the final draft of the picture. He would be on payphones in Texas, and we would talk over the project with him.
Between the time I was a still photographer and the time I became a director, I was a cameraman. I was a DP for some number of years. Not something I really wanted to do for a living, but I felt this was a logical progression from still photography and a position in which I could really learn much more clearly how movies are made and get closer to the action, so to speak.
And Robert had done a short film called China Lake, which had it was about a rogue cop, and it was shot in widescreen and had the same sense of hard-edged realism and violent psychology.
And China Lake was in the same spirit and genre as The Hitcher. And he had been a stills cameraman. And I don't know, we were just overwhelmed by his work on China Lake.
My agent at the time called, and I still remember his words. He said to me, I have a project I'm going to send you. And you're not going to believe, he said, how much fun you're going to have making this movie. My agent sent over the script of this thing called The Hitcher, and as I was reading it, I was thinking, oh boy, did I ever make the right short film to get this job? Because I had in effect already made the movie.
Well, John Seale had done Witness for me. Just to meet John Seale, you want to keep working with him forever. He's really such a unique individual.
And Ed said, you should listen, you should check out this guy, John Seale. Of course, I'd never heard of him. Nobody in America had heard of him at that time.
I wasn't too impressed with the script. I did feel that there were an awful lot of people killed in the first 36 minutes. And a lot of it, as written, was slow motion death. And I wasn't really and honestly prepared for that. So I had a long talk to Robert Harmon on the phone and proffered that and said, look, I'm a little worried that there's so many people just getting slaughtered in slow motion. And he said, no, let me tell you how I'd like to see the film made. And I think 23 minutes later, I signed up.
And I hired him. I'd never met him. I met him the first time when he came to LA to begin work on the movie. And it proved to be a very happy collaboration. There was a brief period I recall in which we were discussing Terence Stamp, somebody I was very interested in. And it didn't work out. Terence was very clear that he felt that it would take him in a place he didn't want to go at that moment. That's how he put it. And he's been very kind in the years since. I run into him every now and then, and he has always expressed regret that he had made the decision because he seems, apparently he's a fan of the movie.
Sam Elliott came through an interview. We interviewed him one Sunday morning at somebody's office in the San Fernando Valley. He was so scary that I was afraid to go out in my car and even drive by anyone. But I thought he was going to do the film, and then he backed out at the 11th hour. And we got Rutger. We were very fortunate, to get an actor of Rutger's caliber.
Yes, Rutger was, I thought, an unattainable possibility. I believe what pushed him over the edge was that he screened my short. He wanted to see what I had done as a director.
I saw a short film that he had financed himself because he was tired of being a set photographer or a Playboy photographer he was for 2 years, and he wanted to photograph movies. And it was a wonderful movie.
I saw that film along with the script, and I just felt, look, I got to do this movie.
Who is he? We don't know. No prison record, no driver's license, no birth certificate.
John Ryder is, on one hand, a very tough, resourceful, murderous character, but on another hand, no longer wants to live or continue. But he wants to stick around long enough to pass on to this one kid, this one person who he finds has a force of life, how to be, in his terms, strong enough to survive.
In the original script, he was described as skeletal, with apologies to him. I remember that Eric Red used to talk about Keith Richards as the model. He was also described in the script that I recall reading first as having no natural voice, but he had a sort of an electronic voice box. I think in general, the portrayal physically and emotionally of the Ryder character in the original script was a little bit more monstrous. He was certainly a human being, but he was, I think, without goodness, without any quality of anything human. He was just a force of horror and an awfulness.
There's so many elements to it that we think about, because Rutger's character shows up at the right time, at the right place. Is he magic? Is he supernatural?
John Ryder, that's a rental company. This guy's name is not John Ryder, forget it. And to me, he doesn't exist. He's just a piece, he's just a ghost that comes out of the desert sand and starts haunting people.
He's shooting down helicopters with pistols. He's slicing people up left and right, and they can't catch him. He can sneak into a jailhouse and kill all the cops and unlock my cell without me knowing.
There are valid criticisms of the movie in terms of, how could he pop up here, and how could he pop up there, and how could he know where he was, and all those questions, which are, from one point of view, valid questions, but from my point of view, and I believe from Eric's and Feldman's and all the other filmmakers involved in the movie, the questions are not appropriate, you might say. It's just, if you don't get it, you don't get it, but the movie's not supposed to work on this super real level.
I think it's a normal story of a serial killer, except the cleverness of the script made it more. He made the man more than just a character on television where you see villains today. I think it's one of the most horrific characters in the history of films. And I think that's why the picture enjoyed the success it did.
To me, the first thing that is scary about a character is intelligence. If the guy is intelligent, and now we know they are around, but that's scary. So you can't fool him too easily. You have to be smart to fool him. It lifts up the whole story. It lifts up the bad guy. It lifts up the hero. The more complicated, the more complex the bad guy is, the better the hero is off when he finally gets it.
I don't want to die! My character shows him that I want to win. That I'm not so fearful that I'll just collapse and let you stick that knife in my heart and drain my life. I want to survive. And he recognizes that, and that inspires him to take me to the next level. He says, okay, kid, I'm taking you on a ride. What are you doing?
In terms of the character, I thought, you know, this is a guy who knows he's very sick, but he doesn't quite know where to go to have it fixed, or he doesn't know how to end it. He is a coward too. If he would have the guts to commit suicide, that'll be fine, but he doesn't have that. So I guess in his, you know, somewhere in his mind, he comes up with an idea that if he can just find somebody who gives a little shit.
Why are you doing this to me?
And he can have some fun with, and then he'll ask him to just take him out of the way.
You're a smart kid. You'll figure it out.
No, I thought Rutger's character was a very well-balanced weirdo in the desert, you know, and very frightening because of that. Because he was subdued too. He just wasn't some screaming maniac. He was very subdued and evil about the whole thing. And I think that built a suspense in the film that might not have occurred otherwise.
Ryder wants to teach the kid, train the kid, make him, strengthen him, forge him. And the kid, like all people who are, you know, in the process or being challenged by someone, has both a terror and a respect for this guy, and also, by the end of it, a desire to rid the world of him.
It may be a slightly twisted view of it, but at the end of the movie, I certainly have always felt that Tommy is left to wonder whether or not, if he could, if the Tommy's character, if the Halsey character could turn back the clock and choose to have never met John Ryder, I'm not so sure that he would choose that he would change anything. At the end, there's that moment when Rutger is laying on the pavement and Tommy walks up to him, and he certainly believes that he's dead. The fact that he isn't is immaterial at that moment. And he kind of caresses his hair with the gun. It's a sort of a farewell. You know, he's not walking over to him with the gun and putting 5 more bullets in him, or turning the rifle around and bashing him on it. It just would be completely wrong. There's a certain gentleness. There's almost, controversial though this may be, almost a thank you involved in it. That's how I've always felt about it. I was doing a tremendous amount of driving around the California area looking for locations, so it was incredibly carefully picked locations. And they were carefully picked as far as their design, where the mountains laid out, where the sun was, all these elements that came together.
It was shot down in the areas around El Centro, California, on through the Death Valley onto the Vegas area, so you get that really old-style Western look.
A lot of the pre-production was trying to suss out how Robert wanted to handle it and how to make the desert, you know, look basically a beautiful place where this madness was going on.
I don't know how many people respond to this, but it was shot in a widescreen format, in true anamorphic and 235 Panavision. And if you see it in that form, certainly on a screen, on a big screen, it has a certain scope to it. And I also think so much of the movie is about, you might say, figures in a landscape. And as soon as you begin to have enormous scope shots with small cars and small figures, you start to feel a certain scale to it. I feel that John's great strength is that his work is beautiful, but always natural. You don't get the feeling, for the most part, of a cameraman trying to show off.
Well, he films in a very humanistic way. I mean, he doesn't try, when he has to shoot in a small area, he does it in a small area.
And in fact, I like it because in some ways I feel putting the camera in the area that the actors must be in, say like inside a car or a small jail cell or shed or whatever. If the camera's included with the actors inside, somehow I think it's a better way of making a film than when you pull the wall out. The actor's psyche knows that it's a fake set. We know it's a fake set, and the camera almost proves that it's a fake set because it can shoot from angles that aren't real.
How about that shot on the Western Dolly down low on the road after I kick Rutger out, and it comes zooming up to him as he stands up, and he just pans up with him, man. He was on a sandbag on a dolly himself, having 2 boys push him down the street.
And of course, it's cinematography, that's good stuff, It's not television, it's big and it's wide, it's open.
The process of working with a younger director, I find, can be quite exciting because they know no limitations. Their imagination goes rampant. And in a way that's fun because Eric's writing was like rampant. He had this stuff in there. And then Robert, I think very wisely, was pulling it back and doing it by inference. And I think that young innocence of new writers and new directors is very exciting to work with.
The experience was very intense, and I was a young actor with limited skills and limited tools at the age of 18 that was put into a very life-altering situation. I mean, as I'm talking in my real life, not in the movie. I really had to deal with Rutger, who was just very intense, and that was possibly the peak of his Rutgerness, if that makes any sense. And he was a very intense, very intimidating person.
I remember how excited he was when he knew that we were going to do it, and he said, I've never acted before really, and now I'm going to act now. And he was, he was stoked. And what I loved specifically about him, that he was totally into whatever would happen between us in the scene.
And I was also working with the amazing Jennifer Jason Leigh, who is as equally intense when it comes to her craft, because this is an actress who has many skills and many tools in her bag, and she made the choice to never break character out of the scene, in the scene. I mean, she was always that character. So here I was, the third in this triangle of some people who showed up every day to kick some ass. And I felt, for the first time, pressure. What real pressure was to deliver.
You want to know what happens to an eyeball when it gets punctured?
There's this moment where I actually elbow him out of the car after he's had the knife, and he catches a tear off of my cheek, and he holds the knife up to the camera, and the tear runs down the blade. This is not written stuff. This is Rutger. And I'm like, dude, just don't fucking stab me in the eye with that knife, And he's very intense with it, picking my tear up and letting that tear run down the blade. And these are the things that I think people picked up as homoerotic moments. When I spit on him in the jail cell and he licks it up. Well, why would he do that? Is he gay? It's like, dude, it's just interesting filmmaking.
I was just, as creative as I can be, and I always come up with hundreds of ideas, and then it's sort of up to the director to say, okay, that can go, and that you can keep, and
And I was fascinated working with him. I mean, I just couldn't, he'd be driving down the desert full speed in the black truck, and there's a white hanky blowing out the window of the truck. And that's just Rutger is holding a hanky out as he's driving. And the director's not going to say, hey, bro, don't put the hanky out the window.
The sport of this picture, to me, and the way the character sort of dances around with the characters in the movie and with the audience as well, is that he has to put them on the wrong leg in order to surprise them again. And that was my goal, basically.
The thing is he doesn't sit down and explain to everybody, okay, director, this is what I'm doing. Producers, this is what I'm doing. I mean, he just goes, and we're all going, what's he got the white hanky out the window for? I don't know. Do you want to ask him? Not really. What's for lunch? And you watch it, and it's just, there's a reason for it, and it pays off at the end.
There's a wonderful scene where Ryder's just shot the two police officers in the car when he's tried to turn himself in, and the kid grabs a gun, and he's going to commit suicide. There's no reason to live. The nightmare's got to end, and he puts the gun under his jaw.
When the director yelled action, it was like something took over. There was this, and it's a really beautiful moment where I fell out of the car and I raised my fingers and I started going bang, bang, and kind of losing it. and I started to rub this dirt in my face, and I looked up to the sky, kind of pleading to God, just in time, which normally would have ruined the movie, for a big cloud to move away and hit me right in the face. And that's when my character just stood up, shook it off, and said, I'm gonna fucking meet this guy. I'm gonna take this guy on. And it all happened in that moment. The director was clever enough to appreciate the work that took place, as opposed to, we had a lighting change, we gotta do that one more time. My DP, John Seals, who's an Academy Award winning DP, probably my favorite and most talented DP I've ever worked with, said in his Australian accent, "Oi mate, look at that there. Let's just get another shot of that cloud going by," and we cut it in, and it's a brilliant moment, mate. And that's what they did.
And you know, it's funny how fans pick up on that stuff because they've seen the movie again and again and again, and they start seeing that stuff. There's so much to be intimidated by that, you know, most of the audience are always sort of in the same mode as he is. Once you're past that, you know, you can start seeing other things, which is great fun, I think.
We desperately tried to find angles and ways of shooting the stunts that would maximise the stunt effect. I mean, it was a stunt movie, and I went for it.
I'd had an idea which seemed at the time like a good one. Everybody has to remember that this was before the days of computer animation of any kind. There weren't even that many computers behind the scenes, much less involved in actually making the movie. It was the sequence in the movie where the three cars are lined up side by side. The end of the chase scene. And two police cars are flanking Tommy Howell and Jennifer's car, which is in the middle. They're about to shoot him from either side out of their two police cars. And the Tommy Howell character gets the idea to jam on the brakes. And since they're all moving down the road together at 65 miles an hour or so, when he puts on those brakes, he would therefore immediately back away, and the two cops would in fact shoot each other, which is what happened. So I had this bit of coverage that it occurred to me that we would take a camera car, an insert car as it's sometimes called, and crane off the side of that car with a camera, off a little crane arm. So our camera car is driving behind one of the two cop cars. And we are craned out and flying along the roadway about that far off the ground, 6 inches or so off the ground. So the road is whizzing by the camera. And the idea there was when Tommy Howell's car hits its brakes, of course, it would immediately come right back at that camera. But since we're on a crane arm, theoretically, as that happened, we could go whoosh and move the camera right over and let that car go right under the lens. We would continue traveling at 60 miles an hour as the two cop cars began to roll. Completely insane idea.
We did the stunt, and it all went off very well until C. Thomas Howell's car went backwards, the camera went in the air, it shot underneath, the other two cars started to go into their turn and should have made safe, but the outer one went into a long slide and crossed over and came into the insert vehicle lane. And of course it was shedding speed a lot faster than the insert vehicle, and the insert vehicle driver, who was a fantastic driver, he realised that he had men on top of the vehicle. He had a camera on the front of the vehicle as well on a low platform, so he had a man on the front of his vehicle who was now looking like he was going to be squashed between the police car and the insert vehicle. So in a split second, he made a decision to put the right-hand wheel down and swerve the insert vehicle to the right. And it just ended up sliding sideways, trying not to hit the police car. And with the guys on the roof, and we shuddered to a halt.
The one thing I never want on a picture is anyone to get hurt. No movie is worth anyone getting hurt.
It doesn't matter how well we planned things back then, there was always an opening for accidents to happen, and luckily the professionalism of that man's driving was such that we just got out of that, quite happily, but we were pretty careful again after that. Rutger was an amazing man. I remember one scene at the petrol gas station that he had to drive out of the shed of the garage, out of the door, and smash the door, and then he had to go up and around and come back and knock over all the petrol pumps. And the stunt coordinator tried it with the door open, and he drove out and roared up the top, turned the wheel, couldn't make it, slammed it in reverse, went back, filled, came down and knocked over the pumps, and Rutger just stood there looking at it. And he said, "Let me do it, we'll roll film." So all the cameras were set up and we rolled film. And he crashed out of that garage. He went up and did a full power turn without stopping and backing and filling, and roared down and knocked the pumps over. And I think the poor stuntmen sat there with their mouths open, because he did something that really, you know, even a good stuntman was having trouble doing, and he just did it like that.
Can I sit by you?
There was a love scene in the motel room, but I remember when we were going to film that scene, Jennifer, I believe, wasn't feeling that was a truthful moment. She felt like that was one of those Hollywood moments that, like, okay, well, here's where the guy in the movie sleeps with the girl in the movie. Well, wait a minute. Everybody's dead and we're running for our lives. Hello?
That scene was changed a bit. It didn't seem to feel right that Nash and Halsey would have sex. You know, there was something it's not a consummated relationship between the two of them, and she's going to get, you know, torn apart between two trucks. And it was better to keep the tension that it might happen, but not consummated.
They already like each other. They're surviving. There's already a bond. It's a survival bond, and that's heavier than anything.
I feel a film scorer's job is to help tell the story. To help. In a sense, you should almost be able to turn the dialogue off and have the music tell the story.
There was a film called Mrs. Soulful that Mark did the score for. Again, it must have been one of his very first scores. And I thought it was fantastic. I really liked the movie too. But I walked out of the movie and I was so amazed by the music.
He just called me. He must have gotten my phone number from my agent or something, and said, I've been a fan of yours. And we had several long phone conversations long before we met, and he just expressed his enthusiasm and was describing what he wanted to make, and it all sounded fascinating to me.
And he said yes. And I still don't quite know why, but we've been friends ever since and worked together many times.
I fortunately came into this business when video was available to the common man, and so I could have a video machine at home and work directly to the picture. Having a synthesizer keyboard and a computer so I can play something in, record it in the computer, hit play on the video, hit play on the computer, and become an audience for a moment and just see, is it working? Is there a connection there? And then the good news is that the director can come and sit next to me, and we can have that discussion before we have to get on the dubbing stage and spend lots of money to record anything for real. We can test it out on ourselves, and we can interact, and we can move it. You know, we can try it 5 seconds earlier. We can take the drums out. We can, you know, play the melody backwards. We can get it the way both he and I know that we're going to want it.
He just enhances the visualization. He just brings you to it. He becomes one with it, as opposed to sometimes I think score can be a distraction for me when I'm watching a movie and all of a sudden, there's the score. Oh yeah, this is a movie. You know, instead of an experience where it's all becomes one and it goes together. And that's what this score of this film did for me, which I loved. I mean, it really is one with the film, and you don't feel that the score is a distraction.
Well, it's a beautiful use of sound. There's a scene when Jim Halsey is locked into the police station after he's been arrested, and he goes to sleep, and he starts having a dream, and he's dreaming of picking up John Ryder. And when Ryder, from his point of view, leans over and knocks on the windshield of the car, it's a sound of several gunshots. And the kid wakes up into the police station, and the cell doors open, and he finds that Ryder's come in and shot all the police officers or cut their throats. And so, in fact, those gunshots had intruded on his dream. That's a sort of subjective stuff.
It's a turn on to me, the sounds, how you put the sound of a movie together, because sound goes straight to your heart. It does not go through a filter of, you've seen this before, you have never heard anything before like this, because it's always original.
I think we previewed the film in New Jersey. It was all very fun.
There's certain moments, of course, in the film where they scream, and then when Nash dies, you can hear people in the audience saying, "It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Oh my God!"
It was so much fun. They were on their chairs, and that's the moment you work for, to see how it gets there and how it is received, and then you know that you did it right.
Some people came over and thought it was a masterpiece. Some people wanted to kill me. I mean, there was a couple of nuns came over to me in the theater and say, "How dare you show this movie?"
And I think it has to do with the realism of the psychology between John Ryder and Jim Halsey. It's not a Freddy movie. It's not a Candyman movie. It's not a guy in a ski mask with a machete that's some kind of fantasy.
The LA Times decided they wanted to do the cover story of the Sunday LA Times magazine about the movie. And we thought, wow, that's fantastic. It'll be on the cover of it's called calendar section of the Los Angeles Times. And we were all interviewed, and it was all very positive feeling. It was all very laudatory, sort of, the movie, and how effective it is, and all kinds of issues. And we're all thinking, this is great. This will be wonderful publicity, and it'll be fantastic. So we all are interviewed, and the day comes for this front cover story of the LA Times calendar to come out. And I remember opening the paper and looking at the front page of the calendar and thinking, I must be dreaming, because the headline of the story on the front page was a large shot of Rutger with his coat blowing in the wind. It was a still from the movie, from what we used to call the ghost gas, this dust storm and Rutger's long coat. And it was a very evocative shot. But the headline read, "How do these movies get made?" by, I forgot her name. And it was basically a story which we all felt we had been thoroughly tricked by this journalist, because there was no hint in her discussion of the questions or what the nature of the take of the story was going to be, that it was in effect not even necessarily negative about the movie, but it was a kind of a moralistic, quote, these movies, how do these movies get made that are so horrifying and so frightening.
Years later, in fact, it was only about a year ago when a woman that I met heard that I'd photographed the Hitcher, and she said, "That dreadful film," she said, how could you have torn that child apart between those trucks?" And I thought, she's sounding like she actually saw it. And I said, "But you didn't see that." I said, "There was just a fantastic little editing of the accelerator going up and down, the clutch coming in and out, Rutger saying, 'Shoot me,' and the gun in his forehead, and the kid not being able to shoot." And I said, "And then the revving and the clutch and the revving and the clutch, and then suddenly the wheel turns and you hear a scream and you go to black." She said, "Not at all true. I saw that poor child get torn apart." And I thought to myself, I know what's happened. You closed your eyes and you saw it in your mind's eye, and when you opened your eyes, we were into the next scene. And for all intents and purposes, she had seen Jennifer Jason Leigh torn apart, but you never see her.
When Jennifer Jason Leigh is torn apart, supposedly the good old Indian way, because it's the medieval period, they used to do that, and the Indians sort of did some of that too. 4 horses, and here they go. Yeah, we're funny creatures.
People always ask me, well, where's the cut footage of Jennifer Jason Leigh being ripped in half, that great makeup effect? And it was never a makeup effect. And it was never, in the script, it was never seen on screen either. It was off screen. It was done actually by sound.
And of course, the sound does the trick there. The sound of the truck does the trick. 500 horsepower. Not 500.
The Hitcher's a film that's funny. It's really a film more about how you don't show it than how you show it. And people think it's a much more violent film, and it got a tremendous reputation when it came out for being this incredibly violent picture. And there's certainly a lot of violence that happens in it, but it's not seen. A lot of it's left to your imagination, or it occurs off screen.
It's Blade Runner is 22 years ago, and this is 15 years ago. But these are, to me, they're big moments because they give you trust. Because if you feel that strong about something, there's something to be found, and there's no way, or there's no use in fighting it.
I think the people who love movies regard The Hitcher as a classic of its kind, and they don't make pictures really like that anymore.
The Hitcher is just my kind of movie, man. Good acting, good cinematography, wicked stunts, and a hell of a story. What else do you want?
It's now, 15 or 16 years later, I still think, I can't believe this. This is great. I mean, it's full of trouble and full of problems and full of all kinds of issues, but they're all within the confines of the much larger perspective of, wait a second, we're just making movies here. It's not the end of the world. So I'm quite happy about it all.